Well, you mentioned the NC State Wolfpack. They are up next. Coming off an 8-4 season, you look up and Dave Doran has won 8+ games 3 times in the last 4 years. And this year he did it with his starter, initially Devin Leary, not starting the beginning of the season because NC State had a lot of COVID issues and they had a lot of players out. They had to shut the program down. So Devin Leary needed some time before he had his legs under him at the beginning of the season. He does take over as the starter, playing really, really well, gets injured. Bailey Hockman has to come back in for NC State. So that made things challenging, but still they found ways to be able to persevere and overcome. I wonder if Dave Doran, because remember, this NC State team was toe-to-toe with Miami on like a Thursday or Friday night playing in Raleigh. Game ended up being like a 44-41 shootout or something like that. They really probably should have beaten Kentucky in the bowl game. This could have been a 9-3. This could have been a 10-2 kind of season for NC State. And it felt like it didn't come with a whole lot of buzz. They crept up into the top 25 near the end of the season, I guess only to fall out after the bowl game. And so I wonder, as we do, like you mentioned, lots of starters back on both sides of the ball. Devin Leary, if he's fully healthy, should be easily a top half of the ACC kind of quarterback and a real difference maker for the offense. Defensively, you lose Aleem McNeil, but I think Daniel Joseph is an exciting player on that defensive line that I always turn back to. Is Dave Doran underrated?
Yes. Just look at the production that he's had at this job. I mean, he took over 3-9 his first season, then 8 wins, 2 7 wins. Then they kind of peaked at the 9-win seasons. And then they had that 4-8 year where you're just kind of like, okay, well, there's one of those situations you see it all the time. Things come together at the right time. You get a veteran roster, you put together good seasons, and then that class leaves and things bottom out and you're not sure where it's going. And then they rebound last year with an 8-4 season where they looked really good and they looked like one of the better teams in the ACC. And of course, the thing about the 2020 season that we'll always have to try to figure out, we'll never really be sure of, is had it been a normal season with a normal schedule, would things have played out the same way? We don't know. All we know is that NC State went 8-4, and this is a team that on an annual basis is maybe not, competing for ACC titles, but is pretty solidly in that, tier 2 of ACC teams that is capable of beating just about anybody any given week and is one of the better teams in the conference, but it's kind of continuously overlooked.
I absolutely think he's underrated. I think a lot of it has to do with his personality. Like, it's dull, like it's just, he's kind of boring, like go to work, get my job done. But if he was out, tweeting memes like Mike Leach or Lane Kiffin, we would be talking a lot more about him and a lot more about his success. He also, the fact that he plays in the Atlantic, it's kind of, you get lost in the shuffle. If you played in the Coastal and had like a signature ACC championship game appearance, I think we would perceive him differently. Where you look at his run of records, that would have been good enough in the other division. But because he's lacking that, because Clemson has dominated this side, it's just, he kind of gets overlooked. And yet, after the 4-8 season, I think fans fall victim to that too. Fans look at
he was on the hot seat going into last season.
That's what I'm saying. But I think that's because like fans get bored. Like, our coach he's not fun. He doesn't come get the right, I think fans fall victim to that. They get a little bit spoiled and they look around and say, we want a coach with a personality instead of a coach with a consistent winning record.
I think he does. I agree that he's underrated, and it sounds like, Bud, you'll at least be able to present the other side of this on the Dave Doran judgment. But I give him credit for the program building, and so there's a lot of like key strength and conditioning coach D'Antonio Burnett, former NC State player who has really committed himself, and we've seen the way like Aleem McNeil was not supposed to be an NFL draft pick. The guy comes out of Sanderson and ends up developing into one of the best defensive linemen in the entire ACC. There's just offensive line, defensive line. It seems that they've really built out a consistency in the way that they teach the players, the way that they develop them physically. And the NFL picks that have been coming out of Raleigh suggest that the infrastructure is good, and I give Dave Doran a lot of credit for that. Some of that might just be making the right hires. Some of that might be just, letting people do what they're good at. But there just seems to be, like, I think some people like working for Dave Doran because he's not difficult to pin down, right? Like, you know exactly what you're going to get. I can't speak to that. I would need to speak to more NC State assistants. I know some people don't like him, but most people who get fired don't have nice things to say. But I don't know. Anyway, Bud, where are you at with Dave Doran?
I think he's fine. Like, I really don't think he's underrated. I mean, I think NC State has good resources. I think you can do a decent job winning there. They were 4-8 the prior year. Last year, he got an absolute gift of a schedule. I mean, if you recall, like, their schedule was set not to be that easy, and then it became super easy. I mean, Wake, VT, and that was back when the Hokies had a bunch of COVID stuff, then they still get blown out by 3 touchdowns.
They beat Virginia and Liberty, though.
Yeah, Pitt, Virginia, Duke, one of the worst Duke teams in a while. UNC, they get blown out by 4 scores. Miami, they lose. Florida State, they blow them out. Liberty, 1-point win at Syracuse. 1 touchdown win over a really bad Syracuse team. Georgia Tech, which kind of cratered, but at the end of the year, they beat them by 10. 2-score loss to Kentucky in the bowl game. I don't know. I think the advanced numbers have this thing right from last year, guys.
S&P or
yeah. This was not that impressive of a team. It had a good record, but so I'll say this: I'm actually in on this team this year. But I think last year's team was a hoax.
Isn't that a good thing though? If he has a team that's average with the advanced analytics, but he gets to 8 wins, isn't that a good thing?
Not if it's not repeatable. It's just luck.
Well, I guess we'll find out this year.
Right. I'm in on this year's team though. Okay. Like, first of all, I really like Devin Leary. I got to see him at Elite 11 a couple years ago. He's got a big time arm. I think he's a very good player. And I was talking to Corey Smith of Pack Pride on the 24/7 Sports Network, and he was telling me, look, Leary only got like 3 spring practices last year, and he missed almost all of fall with COVID. So he came in there and balled out, despite the fact he had almost no time in Tim Beck's new offense. He had to learn it all, basically virtually. You get 10 starters back on offense. You get 10 starters back on defense. I really like this Josh Harris kid they have. I've heard he's getting in better shape at D tackle to replace Aleem McNeil. He wrecked it in the Army All-American Combine we had a couple years ago in Alamo Dome, and I spent a couple minutes trying to figure out who the hell he was because his jersey got ripped off because they were having to hold him so bad. He's a pretty good player. I think this team could be a whole lot better in terms of quality of play, and also have the same record as last year's team, because this schedule is much tougher. And I think this year's team would beat the hell out of last year's team. It might end up with the same record.
Right. I can feel that. I'm also excited about this NC State team.